Hi, so today we're going to do elements and principles flip charts, but first you have to start by folding your paper into thirds and then making a mark every third half inch on both sides. Use the ruler, line them up, and I just kind of see the lines from the other side and then use the ruler to line them up and just trace the lines. You need 7 slots because there are 7 elements of art and design, and you want to make sure that there are spaces for all of them. Please make sure that your name and your period are on there. So then you're going to label them, and the first one is line, and then there's shape. And I'm making sure that as I'm labeling them, I'm doing them in a way that actually kind of gives you examples of what each one is. So line, I did in cursive in one continuous line. Shape, I did shape form. I did it 3-dimensionally. Color I'm going to do, and value I'm going to do adding the colored pencils to give you the examples. And then the texture, I am drawing different textures for each one, and I didn't like the way that that was lined up, so I made sure that I did each one a little bit smaller so I had space. I'm giving the example by making them different sizes to see how it takes up different amounts of space. And so you need to make sure that you are adding a lot of detail and thought into each of the different elements on the front and on the inside when you're doing the examples. And so make sure that you're coloring them as well. So here I am doing different examples of different kinds of lines, and I'm making sure that there's some interest in there. I'm not making it boring. I'm trying to make it interesting and unique. You do not have to copy my example. You can come up with any example that you want that still fits the theme of line. And so I'm just coloring it in, kind of making it so that there's some bold lines and some thin lines. And inside each of the letters of the word shape, I am just drawing different shapes and using different colors, making it look a little bit more interesting and colorful and unique, and just making it nice to look at. So for form, I'm just coloring it how it would look if it was actually 3-dimensional. So that's why I'm adding some of the shading and detail. And I'm trying to make sure I'm using the proper line direction as well. So I am doing kind of side lines, and I'm doing like straight lines for the front of each of the letters. And then on the sides of each of the letters, I'm making sure that the letters are looking 3-dimensional by using, diagonal or angled line direction, and again using the black to kind of add some shadows. And then I added some shadows on the bottom. And as for color, I am just going along and coloring in all of the colors of the color wheel, and so I'm kind of blending them and kind of slowly making sure that they change from each color to the next color. And when you're blending them, I think that you should make sure that you're doing it kind of lightly layering the colors. And again, you can do it however you want to do it, but definitely needs to be interesting, needs to be visually appealing, and also needs to be colored. So value, that one you don't need color if you don't want, because it's value. So I am just going kind of like I would with the value scale and making it go from dark to light. And then as far as texture, I'm adding different lines and textures into each of the letters so that it looks like each one is a different texture. And so I highly recommend you plan it out, figure out which textures you want to put in each letter or how you want to do it. Again, you do not have to copy mine, but that is what I was doing, was making it so that there were different textures in each of the letters. I tried to make that one look kind of slimy. And I'm just outlining all of the letters so that it looks a little bit darker. I ended up going and outlining all of the letters in black color pencil because I didn't like the way that the black pencil looked. I like it better with the actual black in the contrast. So again, just adding different textures And then as far as space, I was really just trying to show that I was taking up different amounts of space and that there's positive space, there's negative space. And so to show that there is positive space, I am coloring the letters on one side and then coloring the background on the other side, showing that there's negative space. So now I'm going to put the definitions on the inside of each of the elements of art, and then the examples will go on each of the flaps. And then that way you can be very clear on what the definition of each vocabulary word is and what different examples there could be. Choose your favorite examples. If you don't like the examples that are in this specific flip chart, you can switch it up a bit, okay? Just use your best judgment, base it off of what the actual definition is. If you want to Google some different examples, you totally can. If you want to pause this and read this and copy these definitions and examples exactly, you can also do that. That's totally fine. So I'm just going one by one and adding all of the definitions, all of the examples, and some of the examples they needed color to give the actual example of what the definition was. And in this case, it was color. So I'm just going right in with the colored pencils. I prefer to do everything in pencil first before I add the colored pencils, but you can do it however you want. Right here, I'm drawing the color wheel, and I gave different examples from primary colors, secondary colors. I also did warm colors, cool colors, did the color wheel and all that. And then here I am, and I'm just adding color to the other examples, because what you want to do is have colored examples on both flaps. This will make it easier for you to remember what the examples are, and it makes it easier for you to remember what the definition is, and just coloring it makes it look nicer too. So you are actually more likely to go back and look at this and reference this when you are trying to remember what the elements were, what the different words were, what the vocabulary was, and what the examples are. So I'm just tracing over some of my lines with the colored pencils. If you want to start out your lines with colored pencil, that's also totally fine. So then now I'm moving on to value, and I am making sure that you know what tint, tones, and shades are, and then also what, that value actually adds a lot of contrast, adds depth. It makes things look more realistic. And so that's actually really important, because value is important in art, and a lot of people don't know why it's important in art, and it's because it can make things look more realistic. It makes things look more interesting and have that higher contrast. So I was going to do one example and it was not going to fit. So I erased it, and then here I am, and I'm drawing 9 different boxes and making sure that it goes through all of the 9 stages of the Denman-Ross 9-step value scale. So here I am moving on to the next one, and I am making sure that you know what implied texture is and what actual texture is, because there is a huge difference. Implied texture is that there is an implication that there is texture, or implies that there would be texture if this artwork were not flat. If the artwork is actual 3-dimensional, then the artwork would have the texture. Actual texture is like texture that you can feel, and implied texture is texture that it seems like it looks like it would feel a certain way. And then the last one is space. So there's positive space and negative space. And positive space is where it is taken up by the object, or it's taken up by the main subject matter of the artwork. And then negative space is all the stuff around it. So then now I'm just going back and making sure that it's all colored. And so here's what the end result of doing the elements flip chart is, and then the end result of doing the principles flip chart is. So you can pause it to read each of these, and then you can also, if you mess up, it is not a huge deal, because you can just draw arrows to the ones that you messed up on, okay? I don't want you cutting out different white sheets of paper and gluing them in and starting over.